Well, we finally turned the heat on. Today we're working on a 2017 Dodge Challenger, and we're just doing front pads and rotors. So I'll go ahead and show you how I do it, and hopefully you can find some useful information in this video. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and open the hood. And we're going to come over here to the master cylinder. It's under this cover here. And then take this loose. Just let air get in there, just so when we compress the piston on the caliper, the fluid's got some place to go. Now we're just going to jack it up, get the wheel off, and start disassembling. Well, as you can see, we got the wheel off. I just want to point out a couple things that we want to pay attention to. First thing is we're going to be taking off these 21mm bolts that hold the caliper bracket to the knuckle. There's two of those. This one here, this bracket gets in the way. This is a 10mm right here, so we need to take that 10mm out. These are 13mm, but first thing we'll do, we'll get this bracket off right here. Pull these 13mm brackets, or 13mm bolts. We'll hang the caliper, we'll compress the piston, and then we'll get the caliper bracket off, and then the rotor. But I just want to give you an overview of what we're doing here. You can see we got a lot of freedom here. If you can see our caliper bolts, caliper bracket bolts, right here. So now this is free and out of the way. If the slide, the caliper slide, is turning when you're trying to break this loose, I've just got a crescent wrench. I don't have the size of this, but you know, it doesn't take much to get it loose. Before we get the caliper all the way off, we're going to go ahead and pull and kind of push the piston in a little bit so that we don't have to fight the caliper coming off of the pads. I do recommend some caliper hangers. I don't have any, but I do have some bungee cords. And they seem to work just fine for me. So now we're going to go ahead and compress the piston in the caliper here. I'll put a link to the in the description to this kit. There'll also be a link to the brake hardware that I use today, pads, rotors, and the hardware. Okay. So maybe you can watch this piston go in. And again, this is why we took the cap off of the master cylinder, so that we can watch the so that the fluid has some place to go and it goes easily and it's not fighting the seal on the cap. Okay. That's all there is to getting that piston pushed in. So the next item is getting the caliper bracket removed from the knuckle, and again, there's a 22mm and there's a 22mm, and that's what I'm taking off right now. If I said 22mm, I meant 21. Alright, we got the caliper free, the caliper bracket free. Rotors loose. So here we're going to remove the old hardware. Everything seems to be in pretty good shape. I'm going to spray these down with brake parts cleaner. While that's drying, I'm going to get the rotor up here, clean the back side, turn around, clean the front side. So I like to put these up here this way just to make it easier to clean. And all we're doing is getting the shipping grease off of it. They ship them with this grease on here to keep them from rusting. Same thing. And it's important to clean these discs off or the rotors off, because if you don't, you'll have your brake pads on a greased surface and they're not going to want to grip very well. So that's the purpose for cleaning these. Alright, we're going to switch back over to the caliper bracket. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to grease these slide pins. I just like to keep them greased up. It's probably a good thing. The other side, let loose a little easier. You can see it's kind of dry. So I'm going to clean this one up, and we'll end up putting new grease on it. So we're pretty clean here. We'll go ahead and get some new grease on there. Slide this one back. See how this one does. That one came out pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and just clean this one off and get new grease on it too. Okay. Now, one other thing I like to do to prep these is some NSCs, and we'll put it in these channels where the hardware goes for the brake pads. So I'll show you that real quick. Again, this is just how I do things. This is not necessarily a how-to, but this is how I choose to do it. What can happen here is if we have brake calipers, or these brackets will sometimes rust, and then it swells, and then things just don't fit quite right. So this helps ensure that we don't have that problem down the road. Alright. Now we can put the caliper bracket back in place, putting those 21mm bolts back in. I'm going to use a lug nut to hold the rotor back. So these brake caliper bolts, the 21s, are torqued at 70 foot-pounds. We'll go ahead and put the pads in. One other thing I like to do is put the anti-seize on this piston. Just kind of run around the diameter here. And then also this back pad backing plate right here. You can see from the old pads they start to rust right there. So with the anti-seize, this should help with rusting. So now we're ready to put the caliper back on. Looks like we're going to need the crescent wrench again to get these tightened. Okay, well, not tighten those yet. We're going to torque those. Torque specs on these bolts are 44 foot-pounds. Well, now we just gotta get the wheel back on and put the cap back on the master cylinder, start the car, pump the brakes, and take for a little test drive. After we put this bracket back on, it's got the 10mm bolt. So just bring it in here. Everything's back together. Got this bracket back on. 21mm bolts are in place. 13mm bolts are in place and torqued down. So we are good to go. The brake job on this 2017 Dodge Challenger is complete. Now this is an SXT, so this will probably apply to the lower trim levels. I think there might be an SE, but definitely the SXT. But you get into the Hellcats and the ones with the bigger, more powerful engines, they've got bigger brake systems on them. So this is for the SXT. I would not use this for the Hellcats or the ridiculously fast cars. But anyway, if this video was helpful, give it a thumbs up, and if you have any questions, put them in the comments below. There's links in the description below to everything I used, including the brake pads, rotors, hardware, and and also there'll be tools listed down there that'll make this job easier. So thanks for watching. Hopefully you'll see me on another video, but thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.